So that's, thanks very much. You'll have plenty of time to catch up over the next couple of days. So as you see going around the room, this is a pretty multifaceted activity. There's obviously faculty who are right at the center, instructional designers, evaluators, production folks, technologists represented here more or less. And one of the things, you know, each project is going to have a lot of moving parts. So, and many of you are well along the way, kind of understanding how you're going to be coordinated. We kind of want to also help, also understand how it is you're going to be coordinated. They didn't have these in Glasgow, I don't know. You just shouted and you tried to do it in a Scottish accent. How you're going to be coordinated. And one of the opportunities today is to hook, for those of you who are still trying to figure it out, to hook up with folks who are going to be supporting you throughout the course of your project. Let me talk about the kinds of folks they might be. So instructional designers, hands up. We have instructional designers on all of the campuses. Most of them are represented here. I hope you know the ones from your campus. We understand and we love our instructional designers because the ones who are and the faculty support folks who are from the campuses they're kind of an all-volunteer army. They do get together every couple of weeks and they talk about you, faculty. But that's a good thing because they're sharing it. Well, I'm not involved in those calls, so you actually might want to check in with your instructional designer and just check out what's going on. But the reason that that's happening is that obviously they're there to help, they're there to support, they're filled with all sorts of really good ideas which may or may not work in your course. But obviously having that kind of dialogue is really, really important. And the other thing about them meeting together, it's not just to talk about you, it's to trade ideas and information and to figure out, you know, where projects, because the projects across the campuses are doing some really interesting things. There's a lot of opportunities for borrowing and synergy and whatever, and they will be a resource that will help you understand, you know, if you're trying to do something really interesting and new, how you might borrow or leverage what else is going on. So now, the instructional designers on your campuses, of course, I mean, we are exploiting them, and they know that. But there's also some staff, and we appreciate them allowing us to do that. And helping out in this project. The opportunities for synergy and sort of campus development is really, really important here. There are some staff instructional designers, Kathy, I saw a moment ago, Zellers, and Linda Smelser has just joined us. I mean, she flew in last night, apparently, and Kathy will be located at Berkeley, and Linda will be in Irvine. And they'll be available for the duration of the project to work with you and to work with your instructional designers. And their role in some ways is to help coordinate, to provide, you know, access to information, to resources, other good ideas. So one of the things you'll need to figure out as you move forward is how you're going to work with which instructional designers. And despite my facetious comments about the campus folks, we are very respectful of the fact that they have day jobs, and that they are often, you know, stretched very thinly in these very difficult times. So that's why we're trying to bring some additional staff capacity to help them, to help you. So the key thing is for you to figure out, we're agnostic as to who you work with, how, cross-campus arrangements, if you're on one campus and your instructional designer is from another campus or from the project team and you're using video production from yet another campus, all that's fine. And the instructional designers will help you, and our staff will help you figure out, you know, how to combine those resources. But the key thing for you and for us is to know for your project who's on point, if that makes sense. And the sooner we can figure that out, the better we can and help you and get you the kind of the resources that you need. I know that many of you, or some of you anyway, are wonderfully independent, and that's good too. But it's just so we know we can get the help to you. Now, the other group that you need to hook up with, if you haven't already, is in the back, the evaluation guys. Mark and Emilio, put your hands up. As you're thinking about your projects, you'll probably want to, and John will be here tonight, I believe. You want to hook up with those guys and you know, just think about how the evaluation is going to work in your particular project. One of the things that came out in the phone calls that I've been making over the last few weeks with the faculty is that these multi-campus projects are really hard. I mean, they're challenging. And so we love to bring you guys together. We brought the freshman comp folks together a little while ago, and that was apparently a pretty successful meeting, and it got everybody together in the same place with instructional designers and technologists and whatnot. So that's good too. So if you're in a multi-campus project, statistics I know is out there, and the math folks are out there, and I'm sure there's the African studies, are out there, and there's others. Find your colleagues and talk to us, and if it's helpful for you to come together as a team, with supporting folks around you, we are more than happy to help you do that. Do Quinn has even volunteered to act as an arranger to spam you even more on those issues. So use this opportunity not just to learn from each other and hear from each other. Use this opportunity. It's efficient. Everybody's in the room together. If you're not already got a clear sense of how you're going to surround yourself with support, et cetera, to bring all that together, and that'll be great. I left last of all. There are some project staff which are kind of dedicated to this. So we've already introduced ourselves, but hands up, Keith and Do Quinn and me and Artemio and Susan, and Kirk Alexander is leading our technology effort, and you'll hear from him later, and Susan Artemio in the back. We are trying to move this thing along on its many various fronts, and having a great time doing it. Summer is going to be a very vigorous period, and working with our colleagues in the Senate, which is why David is here, to figure out how we actually accomplish all this within policy and in ways which are proved to be engaging and acceptable across the broader university. So I think that's really all I had to say. Do Quinn, I know, has a number of, one last thing, breakout sessions. We heard a lot, so we have a number of show and tell sessions. We have a number of opportunities over the course of the next couple of days to talk about big chunky themes, how to deliver content in what would have been lectures, how to do small group work in a variety of ways. And we've asked a number of people, invited you to come and show off some of your work, really as a way to kind of give us some ideas, but also to stimulate discussion. We know it will be stimulating, and we know you aren't shy about diving in, and we look forward to that. We also heard over the last couple of months the interest in doing some sort of birds of a feather or breakout sessions. So we captured, and it's on sign-up sheets out there, we captured about 6 that we kept hearing. The role of synchronous versus asynchronous being one. How to support academically at-risk students is an issue which I know a number of you are dealing with. Role of social networking has come up a couple of times. What should the next generation, what should we be building towards? What's the vision of this next generation online? It's kind of a vision-y theme. What should we be trying to achieve, say, over the next 5 years? What's our vision going forward? So there's a next generation thing. Curriculum development. We have a whole bunch of really fascinating courses represented here. They were all chosen through a competitive RFP process, as you know, with no thought given to curriculum development. I mean, that wasn't the plan. The plan was to do a pilot project. But if we were to build more, if we were to do something else, given what we've got, what would we do? I mean, there's some interesting chunking opportunities that are already beginning to materialize in math and computer science and other areas. Should we follow those? That's another kind of question. Business opportunities, I think, is out there, which is, speaking to a number of you, I realize that you're using this project in interesting ways to promote local agenda, which are absolutely fabulous and very different, and have interesting developmental trajectories of their own. And some of you, I have a feeling, you're going to go get very rich on the basis of what you're doing here, or on the basis of what you're doing elsewhere. I mean, the entrepreneurialism represented around the room is really unbelievably impressive, as is the social sense of mission, which is really the purpose with which that you bring to the courses that you're developing is really quite powerful. So business opportunities captures some of those long-term development trends, because there's several of you here who have ideas about where you see this going for yourselves. And I thought, and as we discussed with you, we thought it'd be interesting potentially for some of you to get together and share that. But there are other ideas that you may have. Those are the ones that kept surfacing, so we've put them out there on sign-up sheets. But if you want to add other ideas, don't hesitate to. We can just create new breakout groups, and then at lunchtime we'll have an opportunity to sign up. The cutoff is going to be at 1 o'clock for today's breakout session. So there's a breakout session at the end of the day. So try to get those sort of self-forming in a way. So I think that's, now I'll turn over to Do Quinn, who I know has some things to tell us. Thank you.
I was asked to take this off. Hi, everybody. Just some logistical things I wanted to get out of the way before we get started. So if you did not grab a black folder, there are a number of documents in there, some of which are kind of important. So if you don't have one, please grab one later, or if you want to raise your hand, Susan can come around and get you one. But in there are a number of things I wanted to highlight. One is a consent and release form. We are videotaping, photographing these, and so we do need to have this signed. If you have a concern, please come see me and we can discuss, but otherwise, you know, please do sign this ASAP and get it to Artemio in the back there. He's going to wave his arms so you can see. Artemio, please just get it to Artemio back there as soon as you can. The other things that are in here that are important, obviously there's a conference agenda, there is an expense report, so for everybody who's traveling here and you want reimbursement for mileage or taxis or BART or airfare, those kinds of things, we need to, because it's the end of the fiscal year, we need to collect these before you leave. So if you're leaving earlier than the end of the day Saturday, please, please, please put your receipts with your name on it. So make sure each receipt has your name on it. And put it in the envelope, fill out the form, put it in the envelope, because we have to actually input everything and get it processed by noon on Monday. So there's not a lot of turnaround time. So I'll be collecting it at the end of the day on Saturday, but if you leave early, please make sure you get this to me. We also have in the packet a list of all the participants and contact information and bios and things like that. But one thing I wanted to point out is the yellow sheet. This is basically just a compilation of all the really great, fun ideas, tools, and approaches that most of you put in your LOI proposals. So Kathy Zeller was really great in compiling everything. She put it together and she organized it around the conference. So you'll see ideas for content delivery, ideas for assessment, ideas for student interaction, and it included also some ideas from the instructional designers. So this is a great resource. You can definitely pull it out during the different panels and presentations to follow along. So there's that. A couple other things I wanted to say is the reception tonight from 5 to 6:30 is not going to be in this room. We just learned that it's actually going to be at the deck by the lobby, which is actually much nicer. So, there's a break right after from 4 to 5, and then we'll reconvene over at the lobby at the deck, and there'll be a little reception there. One last thing about the panels and the show and tells. When a question is asked, if we could have the moderators or the presenter repeat the question into the mic and then answer it, I would really appreciate it. And the last thing is there are time limits on the presentations, and so in order to keep things moving along, because there were a lot of faculty who had a lot of good ideas, we wanted to try to let as many people as possible share them. We have these lovely cards that will let you know when there are 2 minutes left, 1 minute left, and then the red card means you need to really wrap it up. So if you could please be courteous, follow that, I'd appreciate it. And it will be held up to the camera. Oh, so everybody will know. No.
If we get a red card, does that mean we cannot present next time?
All right, so I think that's all I have. Thank you so much, everybody. It's good to see all your smiling faces, and let's get it started. Kathy?
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome. And it's really exciting for me to be here. I'm Kathy Zellers. I'm the new lead instructional designer for the Northern I knew I was going to do that. Sorry. Northern California campuses. And I really am happy to be here. From the start, I've had a shared vision with this project to create UC quality courses, great courses for online delivery, and it's really an honor to be part of this project, and to I'm extremely excited to work with all of you, brilliant, talented people with a lot of great innovative ideas. So thank you, And welcome, and I look forward to meeting those of you I haven't met and working with all of you. So what we're going to do today are to start off with some panels. And our first panel is called Strategies for Online Content Delivery. And should we go ahead and bring the panelists up? We have 3 panelists. And so the way we're going to do it is to have each panelist do 15 minutes presentation, and then we'll follow the 15, we'll have the little time sheets, these little cards, so we'll try to keep it in 15 minutes. We will do our best to keep it in 15 minutes. And then 5 minutes of follow-up questions from the audience that are directly related to the panelist. So if you have specific questions for him, please ask those questions. And then we'll go to the next panelist presentation for another 15 minutes, and we'll do that for all 3. Do we have 4?
We're together.
Okay, all right. Okay. All right, I don't have your information, so I think everybody will do a brief intro. Okay. And then at the end, we'll have 30 minutes for open discussions, or for open questions and discussion about the topic. So strategies for online content delivery. Our first, shall we start with you then?
Sure.
Arnold? Okay.
I'll introduce myself.
Okay. Dr. Arnold Bloom.
We all have experienced the tiniest technical difficulties can ruin your day. So they asked me to start out here and demonstrate that principle. I'm going to talk about our attempts to convert a traditional lecture recitation course that's a general ed course and has a very broad audience and a broad topic into an online format. And when I try to break it down into what really differed between those 2 formats, there's only a few items, and they should be obvious here. They both will use a textbook. They'll both have a website, which is very common in both formats. But lectures really don't translate well into an online format, and I'll go into why that's so. There's still assignments. We're calling them learning modules. We'll talk about some examples of that, and they can be in common in both formats. Virtual tours that allow you to go outside the classroom can be in common. Discussion groups and office hours, again, really don't have an equivalent, and we're proposing to use webinars for that purpose. So let me go take you through a tour of this, the differences as we see them. And then, of course, most important is assessment. How do we would like, since this is an experimental program, we'd like to do a comparison between both formats and the efficacy thereof. So first, let's introduce myself. My name's Arnold Bloom. I'm a botanist. I'm teaching a general ed course called Global Climate Change, Convergence of Disciplines. It has received the nickname by students of Doom and Gloom with Bloom. Like most courses on climate change, we spend some time on the causes, and many courses on climate change stop there. We found that the students only have a modest interest in climatology, and if we can get them to understand the difference between weather and climate, that's a success. But they're more interested in the consequences that they perceive, and then most interested in what the solutions may be. And so that's how this course somewhat general changes. Been teaching it about 9 years, started out with about 7 freshmen in a seminar, and now we have about 250 students. One of the questions that several of us have is how will our enrollments change as we offer it in a traditional format and on an online format? And I do not have an answer, and I think that's going to be a question we'll all have to deal with. These are the course components that I showed you to begin with. Let me go through them each in turn. First of all, there's a textbook, and as my publisher says, it's a breakthrough book authored by me. And so we do have something to work off of, and that is available commercially. Oh, one interesting thing that some of you may realize or are realizing, and I've discussed this with a few of you, this book is available as a paperback, only as a paperback for about $55. I did all the illustrations to cut down the cost. It's also available for about $30 as an electronic version. In the 1 year or less than 1 year that it's been out, we've sold about 1,400 copies of the in-print version, 2 copies of the electronic version through CourseSmart. I know a number of you may be working with that. That's a common outlet for electronics. So though we have gone to the electronic age, students still like textbooks. We have a website, and this is a project that's funded by NSF to the tune of about $1.7 million to get climate change education to the public. It's called Encyclopedia of Earth. I'm in charge of the climate change collection. This is the Google Analytics here. I won't be using a pointer because then the people who are on the webinar, how many are there? Do you have any idea? Oh, the 3 people who are on the webinar won't be able to follow it. But this is the climate change statistics from that Encyclopedia of Earth, and we get an average of about 1,000 hits per day on the site. So it is a significant, and it's more limited than we want it to be. Looking at the statistics, I'll lead you through there. You can see this is the last year, and you can see that it goes down. We think it's mostly students, and the joke I make that it's inversely related to the sale of beer, and that's one way we know it's mostly students. But if you look at the time of day, it decreases Friday night. During the Christmas break, it decreased quite markedly from December 3rd to January 5th. And it's decreased at the end of the spring semester. So the timing of the hits seem to indicate that the site is being used, and mostly by students. One thing that we've discovered quite early on is that nobody looks at talking heads for 50 minutes. Nobody will sit. How many of you would sit through a lecture for 50 minutes on screen without? How many people sat there all at once, not diverted, and did their sexual harassment training for 2 hours, which is mandated by the state, right? Yeah, not many. So we're moving to much shorter things and using the experience that TED Talks. How many people have looked at TED Talks? It's sort of like I could have told you that answer. This group, TED Talks, Khan Academy, they found that people's attention spans are most readily met with a 15-minute presentation, and that's why we're being limited to 15 minutes right here, because at the end of 15 minutes we get the red card, and no. I'm using as a model Ken Burns' Civil War as a way of presenting materials, and I'll give you an example here, if technology is willing. Oh, okay. Sound? No sound. We don't
Napoleon. Okay. Napoleon. Okay. Failure to consider climate can be catastrophic. Some of you may recognize this portrait of Napoleon. Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812. This chart, often judged the most impressive of all time, tells the story of this invasion from the French perspective. Shown is a map of Western Russia, with the path of the French advance in brown and the retreat in black. The width of the path and the numbers indicate the size of the French army at various locations. The branch points indicate where some troops separated during the advance and later rejoined the retreat. Temperatures are in red and are linked to the path of retreat. The background music is from Tchaikovsky's 1812 overture, which also tells the story of this invasion, but from the Russian perspective. The Grande Armée of France crossed the Niemen River from Poland into Russia on June 23, 1812, with nearly 450,000 troops. The Russian army avoided major engagement with the French and retreated further and further into Russia, scorching the earth behind them. Thus, the French found it difficult to find food for themselves and for their horses. The Russians finally engaged the French in battle outside Moscow on September 7th in the Battle of Borodino that resulted in approximately 44,000 Russian and 35,000 French casualties, perhaps the bloodiest day of battle to that time. The Russian army withdrew and retreated past Moscow. Napoleon entered the city triumphant, assuming that the fall of the capital would end the war. Rather than capitulate, the Russians burned Moscow. After a month in Moscow, concerns about loss of control in France prompted Napoleon and his army to return to France. Here comes the interesting part, the part about climate. Russia has a cold climate. This should surprise no one. By the end of October, when the French troops were retreating back to their homeland, temperatures were dropping below freezing. By the beginning of December, when these troops were again approaching the border between Russia and Poland, temperatures were below minus 35 degrees Celsius or minus 31 degrees Fahrenheit. The 450,000 brave souls that began this campaign had dwindled to only 10,000. Only 1 in 45 survived.
Anyway, that's one thing we're seeing if we can bring an audience that may not have familiarity with numerical data in a chart form. I always make the point that the ability to interpret charts like this distinguishes you from a minimum wage job, and that seems to have some effect. The other thing we try to do is get some learning modules, and we have some from a variety of sources, partly through this national project I'm in. I'm also involved in a project that tries to do an art-science fusion. This is done by my colleague, Wendy Silk, and she prepared we have a format that was developed by Cirque out of Carleton College to produce modules in a format so people who are using the modules know where information is going to lie. Like Wikipedia's success is often because people know where they're going to find information, even if that information is wrong. And this is what we're trying to do with this type of material. So they found that students that have an aversion to science, which is many of our students, can be engaged and learn some very fundamental facts that they retain by composing songs about science. And I'll show you a clip from their final exam. I won't show you the whole thing. You can do that on your own time. Okay, here we go. I won't show you the whole thing, partly because the people who are online are not going to be seeing this.
Hey, Natalie, what's this next song about? I can't believe you don't remember. I'm going to make you guess. Is it about evaporation? No. How about condensation? No. Respiration? Wrong. Perspiration? Transpiration. Thank you. There we go.
That's a teaser. One night, this was funded partly from NSF, a $50,000 seed grant to Wendy. And in fact, it was highlighted last week by Senator Coburn of Oklahoma as how NSF should not be funding their, what they should not be funding. Because one of the 4,000 songs they have on their site talks about using biogas instead of natural gas, which is a heresy if you're from the state of Oklahoma. And that's, here's another module I developed for NASA, and it has to do with teaching students about artwork. But I was trying to find an organism that might be affected by climate change that could somewhat match the panache of polar bears. And since I'm a botanist, I was looking for a plant that had that attraction, and wine grapes seemed to be as close as I was going to get. So I asked the question, what makes the difference between this bottle of wine that sold for $34,000 versus this bottle of wine, which is the kind I'd buy. That costs $2. And the answer is climate. I knew you were all going to answer that way. Okay. And a real question of major concern if you're from California is the changing climate we've observed going to endanger this industry, which is a vital part of our state, but also part of our mentality. This gentleman, a distinguished gentleman who was at Davis for many years, is now deceased, had a way of determining whether climate was well suited for wine grape growing. And the basic idea, it has to do with degree days over the growing season. 1 and 2 means you get $34,000 a bottle. 5 means that you get $2 a bottle, which is true for grapes from certain parts of the state. So we picked 4 sites, and you can do this on your own. For those of you who aspire to have your own vineyard, how many of you out there are there? Everybody aspires to have their own vineyard, just in theoretical, if not practical. So we looked at 4 sites from Fort Bragg to Colfax, and the thing that was quite intriguing, and we have the students go through this, is that if you follow the weather for these sites and look at how wine quality may be varying, you see that Napa is falling out of the range of desirable sites for growing premium white grapes, which is not good news. Davis was never in that category, and neither was Fort Bragg. But the interesting thing here, if we look at the green line versus the purple line, which is looking at the foothills versus the Napa Valley, this is one reason that wineries are opening up in the foothills, because they're getting warm enough in the winter to produce premium wine. So they can do this for their hometown. They can do it they can follow how we did these calculations for these 4 sites, or they could do it for other sites where they may have more immediate interest. So that's another module that we have. We have virtual tours, and this has become something I'd like to engage all of you in. California has a lot of interesting sites in terms of climate within an hour drive of here. We have the world's largest wind farm. We have a site that geothermal produces 7% of California's electricity in Geyserville through geothermal. We're having students from Denmark and UC Systems, Merced, Santa Cruz go through a tour, and we're giving them cameras to film those sites to make virtual tours for our courses. This has grown into the fact that the other Arnold, anyone ever hear of this guy, who's now undergoing aversion therapy, organized 3 climate summits. The 4th one is going to be held by our chancellor without his auspices in the fall of 2012. She wants to have an environmental film festival, which has a student category. We're enlisting Harrison Ford and James Cameron to be judges there, and we're enlisting you to get your students engaged. And we will be presenting materials so we can get students making films. Thank you.
So if you have questions for Arnold for the next 5 minutes, we've got some time for his presentation specifically.
I'll get you next, Jim.
How did you produce the Napoleon video?
Oh, it's actually 10 minutes, but I already got the X, so I didn't show you the whole thing. I've been writing scripts, and I've been having help from Rosemary, who's the instructional designer, going through the scripts, collecting materials that I've used in lectures for years. I guess I'm being broadcast enough. And then said, well, if my kids can do it, can I do it? And so the software for doing video editing is becoming more and more user-friendly. And so but you have to be aware. I think the average, most people say, each minute of video takes about on the order of 60 hours. And that's pretty much the industry standard. So I'm hoping with Learning Curve that will be improved. Is that what you're asking? We're hoping, Jim is also involved in a project for, what's the name of it, Jim? getting other people to do research seminars that are distributed through videos. I think there's a lot of need both to get these rubrics out there. How do you make video that's attractive and engaging, yet doesn't tax you beyond your capabilities? And so we're hoping that once I figure it out, I can convey that to you as well. The other issue, which is really daunting, is intellectual property issues. And so I'm working with we have a person who specializes in IP who's hopefully will give us and it's IP issues for video are much more severe than they are for, say, copying parts of textbooks. So we're working to see if we can get permission slips that you can give to students. If they film people, they can give it to those people. And so that becomes more routine and not like, everybody doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. Did I answer your question? More than you want to know, right?
No, maybe.
Oh.
My question was
Yes.
along those lines too. That Napoleon film is really good. Look, the UCTV seminars, I'm going to talk about that tomorrow just a bit, but I mean, that's a capture of seminar. That's different than producing what you did there. And I've done some of that, and it's a huge, these are fantastic, but it's a huge investment. And my question was, how long did it take you to produce that Napoleon piece? Because you had the music that was choreographed and just ended on the right note, literally, and so forth. I mean, this is no small logistical investment. So how long did it take you to
So the question is, how long does it take? As I said, I think a rule of thumb from most people is about a minute of good video takes about 60 hours.
60 hours. So in other words, you put, 10 weeks, 20 weeks in that one video?
No, yeah, it was my Christmas vacation. Well, no, not that. It was 10 minutes, and it took me.
You wanted 24 of these in a course.
It takes a long time. I'm hoping it gets quicker, and try to make it more formulaic so it is quicker. Yes.
What do you do in a virtual tour?
What do we do in a virtual tour? I'm using as guides Yule Hauser and sorry, big motions. Some of you know what I'm saying. Those of you who don't are just pitying me. The idea, I think there's a lot of good models on PBS on how one does a virtual tour for people. And the question, can we get students? I think it will. If you ask students about Yule Hauser, and they kind of laugh.
So it's just narrated video.
What?
Narrated video?
Yeah, it'll be on the order of about 10 minutes or something like that. But at sites that students would never, like we're trying to get permission to go to Rancho Seco, which is a dismantled nuclear power plant, and students would never, no one would be able to do that on their own. Okay, they're stunned. We move on. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Dr. Mark Kubinec from UC Berkeley.
So I'll start while Ben's moving around here. So what can you get? Okay, we'll get the computer worked out. So at Berkeley, we're trying to teach chemistry online for the first time, and that's actually happening. We launched the course, as you can see up on the wall, for the first time on Monday, and people are actually taking the course, and we had some of the same challenges, and I think our biggest challenge was how do we take what we do in the classroom that engages students. What we have in the classroom is 500 students, and we'd like to have that lecture experience be engaging, and that really kind of translates to what you're doing online. How do you get people? You don't know how many of them there are, and whether they're watching and how much they're paying attention, But how do you get all those people to be engaged in the experience when you're in the lecture hall? If you could take that and transfer it online, that might be a helpful step. So that's something we tried to do, and I don't know what I get to show you here. So what we do is something called, we have a technique called a chem quiz. So a chem quiz is a technique that gets 500 people to break into small groups and discuss the chemistry during the course of the lecture. So what we do is we'll be talking, let me just go back here. For instance, yeah. Oops, sorry. So we'll have a situation where, and everybody's had this, you have 500 people in the lecture hall and you'd like to ask a question. For instance, I'm going to mix two chemicals together. Will that turn red, green, or blue? But in a 500 student lecture hall or online, you're not going to get responses. You don't get responses in the 500 student lecture hall because people are too shy, or you'll get one person, or there isn't a microphone. You can't get that connection. But what you can do is you can use this technique where we ask the question formally, like this, and then give the students a minute to think about it. They'll think about it on their own, and then they'll vote with an electronic device. And when they vote with that electronic device, we'll get a histogram of what their thoughts are. Then after the histogram shows, the students are allowed to discuss it for a minute, and that's where the real power comes in. After you see a histogram of what people think, then you know the person next to you might have a different idea than you do, and something magical happens in the lecture. 500 students break up into small groups, and they start discussing chemistry on their own for a few minutes. And I'll say that again because it's important. They break up into small groups and they discuss chemistry on their own for a few minutes, and I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to assign the groups. I didn't have to do anything special, and I can do it 4 or 5 times throughout the lecture. And if you walk into the lecture hall at that point, it does sound like chaos. There's people discussing, they're pointing at the board, they're arguing amongst themselves. What is going on with the chemistry? And then we bring them together to vote again, and very frequently, the histogram converges to the right answer. So it's a remarkable thing to see happening in the lecture hall. So what I want to do is I want to do a chem quiz right here with you guys. We're going to do this one. You've all seen it now. It's standing up here. It says it takes, and this is actually one we do in the class, it takes half an hour to bake a cake, that is to bring a cake from room temperature up to 325 degrees in an oven. If I put 2 cakes in that same oven, what are their temperatures after half an hour? So what I'm going to do, we don't have electronic clickers here, so let's just do show of hands quickly. How many think, A, it'll be greater than 325 degrees? How many think B, they'll be at 325 degrees? That's about 15 of us. And how many think they'll be less than 325 degrees? That's more of us. All right, turn to your neighbor who might have thought something else, and let's discuss this for a second and see if we can come down to one answer.
The oven has capacity, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but the second cake is kind of incidental to.
But if you cool down the oven by having the second cake, it goes to that level. That's a trick question.
It seems to me that just by having a little bit more massive, it would necessarily lower the temperature a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's significant.
Usually, it'd be less than 325. It would be 3.4.
The reality usually on mass is a bit on the outside. I think it's going to change That's how you know, like a pizza.
So let's come back together and let's take a second vote on this one. So how many think A, that they're going to be greater than 325 degrees? That's nobody. And how many think they'll be at 325? And how many think C, they'll be less than 325? So C, overwhelming answer at this point. And I agree with the C's, actually. And the reason I agree with the C's is when you cook the first cake, and it takes a half hour to get to 325, that tells you how well your oven can deliver heat. Half hour, that's the minimum cooking time. And heat flows like liquid. So if you take a reservoir of hot water, or a reservoir of water, and pour it into another reservoir, the height that you pour it in represents temperature in the heating situation. How far can I fill that reservoir? If I have to fill 2 reservoirs with the same flow, then 2 cakes will have to split that flow of heat. And they split that flow of heat, and you won't raise as high. And people who are bakers, and it's interesting, in this audience we probably have people who are bakers and people who are scientists. They think of it from a different perspective, but it is true. You put 2 cakes in your oven and you have to increase the baking time or increase the temperature setting on the oven. The oven has a heat capacity that it can provide. So let's look and think, how do we move that experience that we just had into the online environment? Well, what we wanted to do was, clearly we have to make it completely asynchronous. That's the first part. You can't turn to your neighbor after you get a chem quiz and discuss the question. So what we proposed was, we'll propose the question, and the students will be able to vote A, B, or C, and then they'll be entered into a asynchronous discussion thread, and they'll just enter, I think it's A because, so they'll enter their thought, and then the subsequent students who view will come and they'll vote, and they'll look at the discussion thread. So basically it's using a video element, a interactive element, and a discussion thread element to bring all those 3 things together. And what we do to help, let me go back here, to seed the discussion forum, we put a possible answer for each one. So if you're the first person to get to the discussion forum, then you have an answer that you can read. Now, it turns out that that's technically difficult to implement, those steps that I just told you here. And we are early adopters here. You can see our course is going right now. So we had to make some compromises. We had to deliver the course through the Angel Learning System because that's what our extension uses right now. So let me go and show you what it looks like in the Angel Learning System and how we demonstrate that now. So I'm just going to go out into, can I do this?
Yes. Yeah, just grab a different tab.
Okay, I'll just grab a different tab and be able to run this. So I might have to log back in. Do we get the volume? And one, I'm going to sacrifice a little hydrogen to add some oxygen, but I'm going to take 3 balloons. Here's one with hydrogen only, one with oxygen only, and one I'm going to sacrifice a little hydrogen to add some oxygen, but have a mixture of the 2. The question I have is, when I ignite these, which gives the loudest, sharpest bang? Think about that for a minute and make a selection. So here, what we're using is Angel's ability and Flash ability to pause the video and allow for student interaction. So the video pauses and waits for a student to make their selection, A, B, or C. Let's look at a possible explanation for each answer. After they choose A, B, or C, balloon A has the most hydrogen, so it should give the biggest bang. That we can't have synchronously yet. Balloon B has all the oxygen, which is very explosive, so it should produce a big bang. Or C, the mixture of gases, allows the reaction to produce rapidly, giving the biggest bang. Think about those 3 explanations and make a selection. So what we'd like to have in that place, so what we're doing is here, what we would have liked to have there is the students type in their own answer, or they go to a video chat, or they record their own little blurb, and then other students can watch them. Technically, we can't do that. So what we have is this, for this implementation, a workaround where they at least get an explanation to consider for each answer. So one of the things I'd like to talk about later in this session is what aspects of the new common learning system that we're going to develop for delivering our courses, what aspects could we have in that common learning system that would help me do things like this? Help me grab students' ideas and project them to other students asynchronously so those other students can evaluate them and then make a second decision. The students here, that after they read the 3 can decisions, they can vote again,
hydrogen
and then
in
they'll
balloons.
get an explanation
So in this first balloon,
of
I have
what the
hydrogen
actual
gas.
answer is.
And when a flame burns through this balloon and excites the hydrogen molecules, they'll react with oxygen molecules in the atmosphere. Now, that's actually a slow step, the mixing of the hydrogen and the oxygen in the atmosphere. So this reaction will occur, and there'll be an explosion, but it'll actually be more of a explosion. The mixing step slows it down a bit. This second balloon has only oxygen. Now, many people think that oxygen is a very dangerous gas, very explosive. But it turns out oxygen is an explosive gas in the presence of other molecules to react with. Oxygen by itself is not an explosive gas. It'll react rapidly with other molecules. In this case, we haven't given it any other molecules except maybe the material in the balloon. But in general, this is going to give almost no explosion.
So the answer is the third.
The third
So
case,
another thing you can do
we're in the demo
effectively
lab with
video
Lonnie to
is
actually see
watch it
those
happen.
3 balloons. So here's a balloon filled with only hydrogen, a second balloon filled with only oxygen, and a third balloon filled with a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. Lonnie could ignite the balloons with his long torch, and we can observe the intensity of the explosions. First, Lonnie will ignite the hydrogen-only balloon. You can see an explosion, but a relatively mild explosion, as the hydrogen reacts with oxygen in the atmosphere. Here's the oxygen-only balloon. Well, that balloon more or less just popped. No real explosion there. Now, the hydrogen-oxygen balloon, that's a very strong concussive explosion. So a couple things to point out there that's interesting. What we did is similar to what Arnold did, is we took the entire course and we made very, very, very short videos out of it. And we did that intentionally. You can see the duration of the first one is 5 minutes, and that's actually one of the longest. That's the first video in the whole series, so there's some introduction and stuff. That's about the longest video in the whole sequence, and you can see the other ones on the order of 3 or 4 minutes. And we did that because we wanted students to be able to go to what they wanted to learn and learn that and not have to go through 50-minute video. We also want to tag these so that students can learn on their own and go to exactly what they need to learn. And we hope that the common learning system that we develop for UC will allow student-centered learning, where they go just to the video they want, or just to the resource they want, or just to the virtual tour they want, and get just that information when they need it and move at their own pace through it. So that's what we're doing right now at Berkeley, and I'll be happy to take any questions on the chemistry course. Yes? Yeah, go ahead.
Have you thought of having synchronous lectures? We also do clickers, and we love them. We think it's an incredible way to have engagement with our students. And I was thinking out loud, is it possible that I might require my online folks to be with me just for that? We have a lot of lab things can be done asynchronously.
Yeah.
The lecture time to be synchronous, and that allows, if a question comes up during lecture, then there's maybe a chat window or something.
Yeah, exactly. No. I think that would be ideal, and I don't know if you can all hear. The question is, have you thought about having synchronous lecture videos so people can actually discuss in real time during those? And yeah, and I think one way to do that is have multiple start times during the day. So you say, we're going to start a synchronous group at 9, and we'll start a synchronous group at 10, and we'll start a synchronous group at noon, and then people can come in and just. And I think the common learning system that we set up should have that facility for multiple start times so students can form their own groups and just email each other, say, we're going to go to the noon start time and we're going to sit together and do it. And I hope we can. Well, I'm on video now, so. No, I would say that my students could synchronously interact with the video if we did that.
And when you went to the Chem Quiz discussion, they would actually be there together to use a networking tool to discuss. Yes?
In case you were to keep the asynchronous thinking about the question, what do you think would be the best way to get students to resolve their answers? So here they're in this discussion.
Yeah, they have a threaded discussion that they look at.
And then what?
So the question is, if you are in the asynchronous mode, how do you get resolution of the question? And I think two things. One, I don't think that the student resolution of the question is the important part of the learning tool. And we have some data that discusses that, and I'll tell you that in a second. What I want the students to do is interact and have some peer interaction and peer learning and engagement with the situation. Whether they arrive at the correct answer or not turns out to be not as important as the engagement part. And I can actually show that with data. If you take the data and you look at students, how they perform on an exam item that's based on a Chem Quiz, it actually doesn't correlate with their clicker answer. So they can answer correctly in the classroom and still get it wrong in the exam. What does correlate is when the clicker answers are flat, that is A, B, and C all get the same answer, the students don't get it, they actually do better on that exam question. And that's counterintuitive, but that's what the data shows. So what this interaction is doing is not helping them learn that particular topic at that particular time. It's helping them identify what their strengths and their weaknesses are. And I think that's the power of the discussion. Yes?
Two questions. One, could you do your hydrogen explosion impersonation again later, maybe over lunch?
Yeah.
The second one is, why does the asynchronous interaction with this other student have to be with a real student? Why can't it be an artificial student that they're...
Oh, exactly. That's brilliant, brilliant. And that's kind of what we've done, right, is we've given dummy answers for each question. So we have created the artificial student. And I think we should have that artificial student giving because we can program it, right? I have this stuff. Here's a good answer for A, here's a good answer for B, and they're all compelling. So actually, the process of considering compelling wrong answers is part of the learning process. And I think a computer could do that brilliantly. I hope we can. Yes?
What's the traditional lecture is 50 minutes, say. How does your videos time correspond?
Yeah, we stacked up videos, so it turns out that the total length of video that you watch during the course is about 35 minutes, and then we allow for this thinking time and this interaction time as well. So if you do one lesson, a lesson would correspond to what you do during the 50 minutes of lecture in the classroom. That's about 30 minutes of video. Yes?
In Jenkins teaching, we had a lot of TAs to create a lot of discussion sessions so that we answer student questions in a more specific, clear manner. And every session is about really students. Do you have some thought about how to overcome this kind of problem online teaching?
So the question is, when we do this in real time and you do it in the traditional lecture hall, we have recitation or discussion sections where there are 20 students that get together and talk about this. So, and talk about things. And they're very valuable because in chemistry, problem solving is paramount. And it helps to see an expert solve a problem. So what we've done is, and I don't know what the best solution is, Young Ya, I think we have to work towards that. So far, technology pairing one expert with 20 students is actually still kind of poor on the internet. The interactive whiteboards, the having Skype groups or conference calls is still very poor. So we still do that via email and a discussion forum. But what we try to do is get the students to voice their own questions in a larger forum that a GSI moderates. So the students do break up. There's 70 students taking this course right now. They're broken up into 20 student teams, and those teams have individual discussion boards where a separate GSI monitors them so they can answer questions specifically. But right now it's all done by text, and I don't think that's very satisfactory yet. Yes? I think I have to stop, I guess. I'm sorry. I'm getting a red card. 70 students, and there's 2 GSIs. So they're monitoring they're monitoring 3 groups of 15 students each, or something approximately like that. There are 6 discussion groups on the 70 students, so there's about 12 students per-ish. I have to stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and remember, we'll have more time to come back with more questions. So, Dr. Pan, Dr. T.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Brian Thill. I'm the writing director in the Humanities Core course at UC Irvine, and I'm just very quickly going to describe the basic structure of the program because it's rather different than some of the ones we've heard so far. It's a humanities course. It's sort of a hybrid lecture and discussion sections, interdisciplinary and so on. I'm going to just give you a quick overview of what the program looks like now, and then David Pan, who's our course director, he's going to talk about some of the ideas about the pilot project that we're trying to implement. So very quickly, the Humanities Core course is an interdisciplinary humanities general ed course and a lower division writing course at UC Irvine. It engages with 9 different lecturers from across the humanities, of course, across the 3 quarters, 8 units each quarter, because it's split in terms of a lecture component, the 4 units, and a writing component of 4 units. So they have 3 hours of lecture each week with different lecturers in the lecture hall, and then they have corresponding 3 hours in classroom discussions, which is very writing intensive. They do 7 essays and research projects in humanities topics across the year. So it's as much a writing course as it is a lecture course. Because of that, we have some particular challenges with how to implement that with the pilot project. So we've been thinking about ways to make that transition, thinking about how to deal with the lecture component separately from the discussion or transitioning from one to the other. Other dimensions about the program? Oh, I should mention a couple other things that we're doing online already. We've, over the course of several years, implemented in the program a series of different things that have moved different components of the class online. We have forums that we have each week that we have a streaming video that we archive. We also have an instructors resources page which our TAs use and which becomes a sort of clearinghouse for all of the different writing assignments and prompts that we use. We use message board and online electronic environments for Dropboxes, message boards, and all those sorts of things as well, in addition to the actual classroom sections and discussions. So it's a class that's moving, seems to be gradually but progressively more and more online anyways, in terms of how sometimes grading and marking and commenting goes, which in a humanities writing class can be very intensive. So that's been a slow learning curve for many of our instructors to move that part of it online, but that's become an increasing part of the class as well. So our thoughts for the pilot project are going to begin with the lecture component, where the translation into the pilot project is simpler, and then toward these issues of how to integrate that into the section and some of the questions that were just now coming up about how you deal with those more specific kinds of questions in an individualized setting with smaller student populations, and particularly with the issues of writing in the humanities, which I think is our particular challenge in having to deal with how we will engage with this project. Okay, so I'll turn it over to David. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. So the main challenge that we have in humanities as a discipline is that humanities courses, I think most professors in the humanities take a pretty dim view of the idea of online education. And I think there's a good reason for that, because there's a real difficulty in converting humanities education into any kind of mass type of education project. And I think there's 3 reasons for this. The first reason is that what you're doing in a typical sort of humanities seminar, which is sort of the ideal mode of teaching, is there's a brainstorming element in kind of humanities seminar teaching, right? You can't really, I mean, you can reproduce it online, but it would have to be, you know, like a web conference. It would just be a sort of another way of trying to get that same kind of brainstorming atmosphere into an online environment that you'd have, ideally you would have in person. And then the second part is that there's a real strong component of, I guess, real oral presentation that goes on in a seminar, right? The students, they have to overcome that impediment of presenting something to their peers and to the teacher every time they speak up, right? And so it's a process getting students into the frame of mind where they'll feel comfortable speaking and feel that their statements are going to be taken seriously. And so you're teaching them, you know, both this kind of brainstorming activity, but also oral presentation skills in general. So it's hard to reproduce that on an online environment without really just having, like a web conference that would try and reproduce that situation. And there's really no way of somehow making it more cost efficient or something like that, because you're constrained to that kind of small group interaction. And so the best mode of teaching humanities really has been traditionally, in liberal arts colleges with small seminars and instructors in these small groups. Now, the difficulty here, though, is that that the experts in the field are not necessarily, in fact, very often are not the best ones to lead a discussion section, a seminar, right? And this is a problem, right? So that you go to a private, elite university, and you might have, the expert in the, in Goethe, right? That's partly my field, right? Leading a discussion seminar. But they'll be a horrible discussion leader, right? They know the material inside out, but they don't have the skills to bring out that brainstorming and to bring students out into that oral presentation mode. So, so the basic options that have been developed over the years to teach humanities are, lectures by humanities professors, which, can be okay, but generally are not ideal, right? Second, you'll have instructors that will teach a class who are not sort of experts in the field, but they'll be basically, they'll be what we have are writing composition instructors who will be teaching writing skills, and this is part of what the humanities course teaches. Or you might have professors doing the discussion sections, and there's really problems with all of those models. And what the humanities core course does is tries to kind of square the circle here by combining experts in the field in these big lecture halls and lecturing on the material, based on their expertise, with a core of, we've got like about 40 instructors who are composed of some ladder rank faculty, fewer and fewer these days, but also then we've got a core of very experienced, I guess they're like adjuncts, but I mean they're instructors for the course that have specialized in teaching these discussion sections, but they've been doing this for years, and they have these track records of really excellent teaching skills in these small group discussions, right? And like I said, it doesn't necessarily correlate with being an expert in the field, but they can rely on the lectures from the experts in order to orient their teaching. Right, and then we also have graduate student TAs that teaching these discussion sections as well. But by having all these three groups in the discussion sections, we have a sort of constant core group of people who have expertise and can sort of disseminate it across the whole teaching core that we have teaching the discussion sections. Right, so I think what the humanities core course has been able to do is sort of is combine the expertise of the experts in the lectures with very skilled discussion section leaders. And I think that's the unique aspect of the course that really has not been reproduced hardly anywhere else in the country, really. So, but it turns out that this model, I think, is really a good model to use to expand into an online environment, precisely because the lectures can then be expanded into online lectures in a way that would allow more students to take the course, even though we won't have to, employ more faculty to be doing the lectures. So the basic constraint that we have is space in terms of teaching the course, and that's really the main thing that the online instructional tools will help us in transforming the course. So right now, we've got about 900, 1,200 students. That's the capacity of the course because our largest lecture hall is 400. Right now, each professor repeats the lecture 3 times, the exact same lecture, over the course of 2 days, and then they repeat the next lecture 3 times, right, because of this space limitation. So we're hoping, by putting lectures online, we'll be able to allow the lecturer to just do the lecture once or twice, and then in exchange, be able to do sort of extra, question-answer forums that I think would be a good trade-off for the students. So the ones that wouldn't be able to attend the live lectures, they would have an online lecture. In exchange, they would be able to go to the question-and-answer forum. The other aspect, then, is that we'll be able to expand the capacity of the course beyond the 1,200 that we have now. It used to be that all of our bio majors were required to take Humanities core course, but we had to drop that because we didn't have the capacity for all the bio majors that we have now. And so we might be able to return to do that. And the third thing is that we'll be able to then offer the course in the summers. Right now, we have discussion section leaders who could teach the course in the summer, but our faculty lecturers would not be available to do that in the summer, so we could run the online lectures and be able to teach the course in the summer for those students, mostly probably students that have to repeat the course and that otherwise would have to repeat during the year. We're going to try out online discussion sections. The only real advantage of the online discussion sections is to allow students who are geographically not on the UCI campus to be able to take the course. There really, I don't think, is any kind of cost savings involved. I mean, for the reasons I mentioned before about sort of the small group dynamic that's really so crucial to the course. But it would allow us to teach the course to UC students not in Irvine or to students who aren't UC students either. A couple other things that we're going to be doing, sort of minor changes, but we have an instructor's resource page right now that helps us in our communication between the individual instructors, and we're going to be migrating that to a new platform, kind of a database that allows queries by sort of different keywords and would allow we have so many different, such a fund of different instructional aids and worksheets and little quizzes that the instructors have developed. But it's hard for one instructor to access the material of another instructor. At the present, it's a little bit unwieldy, and we want to be able to make that more automatized. Well, allow sort of a robust query system, so that you have a particular you want to quiz about the Bacchae, and you type that in, you get it magically, right? So that would be the other piece. And then the final piece is we have these discovery tasks right now, which are designed to improve online literacy and research skills. And right now, it's something that the assignment is online, but it requires sort of instructors and librarians to teach the skills, and we'd like to turn it into a sort of standalone online module that students will be able to work through, and I think that would be a good place to do that. In the pilot, I think one of the key things that we're going to be testing out is how to create engaging lectures. I mean, sort of similar to what Mark is doing, in the sense that I've got this kind of hypothesis that the key to creating an engaging lecture, both live and online, is to really heighten the drama of the lecture, in a sense, which is to say, I guess there's a tendency of lecturers to want to have all the answers and to sort of have a really strong, I guess, thesis, an argument that they convincingly sort of make to the audience. And in some sense, that's the wrong way to do the lecture, because it destroys the drama of it, right? Because you want to have a lecture where something can go wrong, first of all, right? You know, with the balloon, I like the balloon, but if you imagine if it was in a live lecture hall, right? And you have the long, and there's always the danger that the whole lecture hall could go in flames, right? Up in flames. That's really what engages people, right? You know, yeah, right? That drama of maybe something horrible could happen, right? And that's, I think, what you need in a lecture. I mean, a lecture that's totally scripted and sort of PowerPointed and sort of just laid out without any, you know, possibility of error, that's going to be a boring lecture, as opposed to the lecture where, you know, the instructor has a plan, is speaking, but is not entirely maybe sure of what's going to come next, right? Where there's always that danger of total, you know, failure that I think is engaging to the students in a sense. There's a kind of drama to that, right? Where you're engaging with them. It's not scripted. There's something really being created in the moment, right? I think that's something that we want to try and keep in the online lectures, and we want to encourage that in the live lectures as well. I mean, one of the things I think we've PowerPointed ourselves to death a little bit in our lectures in making it too scripted to get rid of that drama. The other part of the drama, I mean, this goes into sort of humanities lecturing in general, is to really create more conflict in terms of the argumentation. And you know, we've done this in humanities course before, but I want to try and encourage that, of trying to, you know, encourage more sort of conflicts between different professors, for instance, in their perspectives, or even, you know, even in single lectures highlighting the different conflicts. But in any case, we're going to be sort of testing out different ways of working with different online modes, even just PowerPoint, and lecturing styles and lecturing forms that could get transformed into the online environment in a way to try and maintain that drama, I think. And I think that's going to be the key to the way we're going to be running the pilot project. So, you know, we haven't decided exactly how to do the videos of the lectures yet. You know, I guess the 15-minute maximum rule might be a good one, but we might just cut up, you know, we'll be videoing the regular lectures, and we might just be cutting them up into 15-minute sections. Ideally, I think that the lectures would be actually synchronous. I mean, the online would be sort of a live broadcast in a sense, like a kind of like a sports broadcast, you know, and allow online audience to be able to ask questions. Well, we'll see. I'm not sure if we will have the technical capability to do that. But in any case, you know, the bottom line in the humanities, I think, is there's not a huge amount to be gained by going online, except for really overcoming the space limitations that we currently have in our lecture and discussion formats. Okay, thank you. Oh, okay. Yes?
David, I think that drama and risk that you're describing come with spontaneity, and
yes.
The way you're going to get that is through webinars, probably. There is risk and danger and drama online in different spaces, such as discussion forums. It's a different kind of risk that can emerge there. But I think what could happen in a webinar, such as the Adobe Connect that we're running here today, is that you're there, the
right.
lecturer is there, the instructor's lecturing, but there's a back channel, a chat room, where there's all sorts of questions being asked, for example. It will be a different kind of danger, a different kind of risk.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a laudable thing to try and do, to try and create those magic moments and try and see if you can get the unexpected sometimes, invite the unexpected sometimes in that format. I'm not sure if you'll get with asynchronicity though, because asynchronicity is kind of more deliberate, it's delayed. Asynchronicity is good for reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you want some of that too, but in a different part of the course. You know?
Right, well, I mean, the reflection is in the writing assignments, essentially, exactly. Right, yeah. So, yeah. But yes, but we're going to be, I've been looking at different software possibilities, and I think we might be working with Adobe Connect to do the web seminars.
I think a videoing a lecture can be reused 10, 20, 30 times, right? That means that professor spending 1/30 of the effort, but we could flip that around and say they could put 30 times more effort into that one lecture, right? So 3 years of their life could be spent into making one set of lectures. Well, I'm curious, what would you do if your professor
You know, I just don't think that spending more time on a lecture gives you a better lecture, necessarily. I think that, again, you need, I mean, you know, I did the lecture, I did this past year, I did my first set of lectures for the Humanities coursework, and I spent a huge amount of time preparing these very elaborate slides and presentations and stuff. And, you know, the response I got from the student evaluations was that it was just too packaged, right? You know, I made the PowerPoint slides available to students, and they said, you know, we got the PowerPoint slides, they were so good, we didn't feel like we needed to go to lectures, you know, what's the point, right? So, I mean, I really have the sense that if it's really, it's not so much a matter of, right, the amount of time or the amount of scriptedness of what's going on, but really developing that sense of how to create, it's not just drama, but really also a sense of meaning for the students. Because the thing about humanities, it's about meaning, right? It's about, you know, you read Shakespeare's Hamlet. Nobody's going to give you, you know, the answer to Shakespeare's Hamlet. They're going to give you some kind of presentation that will help you to arrive at some kind of meaning for yourself of what's going on there. And you know, it's not about, you know, plowing them over with some incredible thesis about it. It'll be about bringing out what really the issues are, at least, you know, for you at this time and place. And that thing about time and place, that's why every year, even though we have the same syllabus for 3 years, it's a 3-year cycle, we have the same syllabus, every year we're going to be revising the lectures. So even though, you know, we'll have the video of the lectures, we're going to only use the video once. And the next year we're going to use the video, do a whole new video, do a whole new set of lectures. Because it's really part of it is that kind of time and place of the meaning of that text, right? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Something more general that I keep hearing here, and I think that we have to challenge this group to get out of it, and that is continually going back to comparing this to the in-lecture format. There is no good reason to do that. There is no
I'm sorry, compare it to what format?
Lecture format. So we keep saying that, well, and I'm going to follow up on Jim's point. I'm saying, well, how many minutes would that take in lecture form for you to do it online? And now I'm also going to direct this also at the courses committee people here, okay, the gentleman sitting here. We need to get out of this Carnegie rule thing if you're going to do online, because it doesn't work. And no matter how hard you try to make something into a 50-minute lecture so it matches in-course lecture, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. So we have to get out of this mode of continually going back and saying, well, if I was to do this in the lecture, there's no data that says the lecture format's any better than the online format. So why are we even comparing? And I think we have to really come to grips with that.
I have to, so the question is how we come to grips with the idea, the fact that the online is never going to be the real live lecture. We need to really work. There's no reason to compare, right? There's no reason to compare. And, you know, I have to admit that our plan is basically to take our live lectures and just put them online. I mean, that's basically our plan, because like I said, the amount of work of creating this new type of thing, we just don't have the time to do that. Not only in terms of, I think I have 8 other faculty lecturers who I have to kind of cajole and plead with to get them to do what I want, right? And to get them to develop this stuff, I wouldn't be able to do it. But the second thing, though, is, and more importantly, I think, is that I just don't think that the online format itself is really going to be so much the problem as really just improving the lecture format already in itself.
What I'm saying, though, is that this whole project was put up as an exploratory, experimental situation, and that's what we've been told.
Yeah.
If we keep just going back to the lecture format and saying, this is what we're trying to do, I'm not sure that we're moving forward. We're just going to fall into the same repetitive problems that all the other online problems, all the other lines tried and failed. And the reason they failed, in my opinion, is because they kept trying to recreate something that you can't compare to. It The moment you do an online course, you find out that you can get 3 lectures in about a half an hour. Okay, so how does that compare to an online a total lecture format? It doesn't, and I'm just saying I'm not sure why we're comparing. That's all. Why are we even comparing? Why should we compare?
So I'm going to interject because I could see discussion going on for 2 years.
No, I know, and that's
So here's a thing. It's a research project, and David has set out some really compelling challenges, which is, I don't have my notes, but brainstorming and oral, getting people to speak and engage with concepts, and so one of the possibilities for the project as a whole is to evaluate different approaches to achieving those objectives. And, so we're asserting a range of hypotheses here, which Mark is writing down, and Emilio, right? Because these are hypotheses that we're not going to be able to test against a variety of different approaches to very similar kinds of concepts. So I can't wait to be here like a year and a half from now, having exactly this discussion. We can go on for a year and a half with all the data underlying them.
It might be better if we thought of the lecture and moving into the online environment and trying to establish a conversation with the person who we're trying to communicate with. In an online environment, we have an aspect of agency that is very focused. In a lecture environment, that focus is diffused because of the environment in which the people sit in. When a person is looking at the screen, the attention of that person is on the screen. We don't have to capture that attention. What we really have to do is we have to establish a mechanism of conversing with that student over the digital environment. What are those aspects that foster conversation? So think of the lecture as a conversation between 2 people on the corner somewhere. And I think maybe we might have a better approach rather than thinking of it being lecture or distribution of material. And it's more of a conversation about a topic.
Thank you, David. And I want to encourage everybody now to ask everybody on the panel questions and continue the conversation. We've got 30 minutes.
Somebody going to moderate?
Yeah, we need a moderator.
Oh, okay.
David, you had earlier said, I'm not sure what the win is going online except for a couple of things that you mentioned. What I noticed when I went with Mark's model of using the clickers is I got responses from everyone. And so there's a possibility of using the online space when you ask a question, even in a small 30-person group, you're not going to get everyone to speak. You might have a shy person, a wallflower, who just listens and reflects but doesn't really share. And you could use the online space and kind of have them do a Google Doc. I'm going to ask a question, and then everyone needs to respond, and everyone needs to see and reflect on the other group. So you could kind of mandate participation where you couldn't if you had a 50-minute discussion and you didn't have the time to get everyone to reflect on it. So it's just a way to get more participation that I don't think you've considered.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's obviously, in a live discussion, there's also different techniques to get everybody to participate as well. But I think, going online, there's going to be different techniques, and we're going to be looking into that as well. Thank you.
I'd like to actually piggyback on that, if I could. I think there's something important for everyone to keep in mind when we use this term participation. I think that, in theory, is an excellent idea, and I agree that there's something about that mechanism. Maybe it's just this generation now, too, who feel sometimes more comfortable dealing with the screen and feel that it's more sort of democratic, or they feel there's a sort of anonymity. There's all these different things that factor into it. And those are all to the good, but those aren't the sum total necessarily of participation. There are lots of studies, anecdotal or otherwise, to sort of indicate that a lot of the students benefit personally in the class from not speaking up, from being that wallflower who sits and listens to what others are saying. And I say this as someone who has spent years and years as an instructor trying to come up with everything I can to have the most robust, active, dynamic participation in class. So that's something I take very seriously, and I see that as a real imperative. So I'm for anything that improves the discussion and makes it more widespread, but we shouldn't automatically confuse that or see that as the limit of what participation is, that just because we're getting more students answering. I know that's not what you were saying, but I just wanted, since you threw that concept out there, I want us to keep that in mind too, that the parameters for what constitutes a legitimate, meaningful learning kind of participation should include that, but they should include a lot of other things as well, which would be important for us to be building into our curriculum or our assessment, right? What other sorts of measures we get for what students are doing, not just how many of them are talking.
Yeah, and I want to make a defense of the lecture format as well, because you can have a very intense participation in a lecture, and just think about the difference. Think about it when you go to watch a movie, right? You go watch a movie, whether you watch it on a big screen in a movie theater or on a, on a DVD at home. Your level of participation isn't about how much you speak or what you do. It's really about how engaging you find that movie to be. If it's a boring movie, you're not going to be participating. But if it's a fascinating, really gripping movie, you're going to be participating. You're going to be as much in that as you could be in anything, right? And that's what you're after in a good lecture, right? And so you can put that good lecture, I think, in an online format, and I don't think it necessarily has to be so different than taking that movie, moving it from a big screen in a movie theater and moving it to a DVD in your home, and you can still get that same level of participation. So,
Question for Mark. We want to make videos, short videos with our material also, but I don't want to make those depressing sort of videos that you saw on cable TV 15 years ago. It's really kind of sad. And so the vision that I have of what kind of videos was exactly what you wanted. It was really good quality. So I'm wondering, how did you do that? What resources did you have? How long did it take you?
Are we still, do I need to repeat the question? Yeah, so the question is the quality of the video that we achieved in Chem 1 for broadcast, how did we achieve that and what kind of resources did that take? So that was funded by the Dreyfus Foundation, and to produce approximately, let's see, so there's 38 lessons in our course, and so something like 38 times 30 minutes, some maybe 900 minutes of video. That took the entire last summer in the studio, so several hundred hours in the studio, and it the bill for the studio time and production time and getting them all up in the format they are now was something like $80,000 in work. So a dedicated studio and that kind of time, so 3 or 4 months of my time in the studio to get that up, and something like $80,000 in time for technicians, audio people, video people, and that's what it took us to do. Studio was on campus, so we have a brilliant facility. In fact, the people who are filming now were involved in the filming of those in-studio productions.
Can I ask a clarification? Is that that's the lecture and some exercises and some demonstrations?
So that included everything, so the beautiful demonstration that you saw, everything, yeah, that whole sphere. Not just the lecture, the putting together of all the interactive quizzes and the video of the demonstrations as well. And I'd like to say, just as long as we're talking about this, one of the reasons we did do this in very short segments was exactly for the question that came up earlier. I don't want to take the lecture and transmit it directly to the online format. What I want to have are learning elements that are accessible online so that we can invent the next generation. We still are going to need learning elements, but we need to have those accessible by the most modern technology and the most innovative thoughts. So the fact that we have lots of learning elements now that are small, there's nothing that says the student has to go through them in the didactic manner that I set out for them to do them. They can go through them in the direction they want, and I hope, ideally, that they're led by the internet. That is, they're led by maybe a cognitive tutor on the internet that shows them where they're ready to learn and where they're ready to go next, or they're led by their peers. They form a peer group and they go through the material together. So it is totally different from a lecture, and we're using the power of the internet and the power of computer technology along with our content to make a better learning experience.
I want to respond to that. What you just said, and you mentioned earlier about how your course is set up so that students can learn what they want to learn when they want to learn it. To play devil's advocate, what happens when what they want to learn and when they want to learn it differs from what you want to test them on and when you want to test them on?
So a very good question. The question is, if you go to very student-centered approach where the students have free reign to learn what they want, when they want, how do you assess them and when do you choose to assess them? And I choose to go to the more European model where we have a time frame in which they can peruse the data, go through and learn whatever they have, and there are time frames where they will be assessed. So it's totally based on competency. When you believe you're ready to take a competency exam, you sign up and take the competency exam. And it might be any time during the semester. For the students who are great and who go through this very rapidly, their whole, what we call a 16-week semester, may only take the best students 2 weeks to go through. But longer students, students who haven't had any high school chemistry, maybe it takes them the 16 weeks to go through the whole field of chemistry that we have them. Either way, the same competency exam occurs. They have the choice of when to take it.
And two questions. One is just getting the ballpark of the numbers. We can talk maybe later. You said 38 hours. That was for 4 units.
Yeah, so the question is how many units is the course? The course is a 3-unit course. So we expect them to, and I should know how we do the calculation to do that. But we did have a calculation where we went through how many hours you would spend on online video and how many hours you would spend in discussion and how many hours you would spend doing actual online homeworks and those kind of things. And we added them all up to get a 3-unit course. Yeah. Yeah, so, and we were the question is how do you come up with the right number of units, and we were forced to do that by our curriculum, our committee on courses that said, well, you're going to offer all these things, how many hours of student involvement is that, so we can assign units to it. And we did do that, and I'm sorry I don't have it on the tip of my tongue.
And a brief second question was, did you think about allowing students to upload their videos? They do the experiments instead of you doing it?
The question is, did I think about having the students upload their own videos, and not for doing the experiments, of course. I don't want anybody blowing up hydrogen balloons that doesn't have the facility to do that. But I would love to have students upload their own videos about what their thoughts are to various questions and have them do peer review on them. But not actual experiments, yeah, demonstrations.
So everybody's going to have $80,000 to develop these high-end lectures. I call them sort of studio lectures. And well, what about the Khan Academy? I mean, his budget seems to me is zero for producing these, and these are really pretty powerful lectures. And it seems to me that we should be developing some of these models as well. And so that we have that available, and there's autonomy. You don't have to go to IT. You could really produce these by yourself.
Yes, so the comment is we went for high production value, and we went for high production value because we had, so the Dreyfus Foundation had a motivation. They wanted high production value so we could produce these and distribute them independently of a course. But I absolutely agree that you can get the same kind of impact in a Khan Academy format where it's a single person with a whiteboard and who is engaging enough, and that can be done for literally a fraction of the cost. Yeah.
And I have another question too, and that is with Humanities. So David, why couldn't you do some of what Mark and Arnold did in Humanities? Because I completely agree with where are we here? Yeah, Roger. Yeah, Roger's comment. It's not a matter of just putting a video camera in front of a lecture and saying that's now, it's sort of a video podcast and saying that's going online. And so, I mean, maybe there's some of that, but why couldn't you do the same thing as what Arnold and Mark did with some of the material that you have?
let's see, I guess there's two answers to that. The first answer is just sort of my own constraints in this course, is that I'm only, I'm sort of at the mercy of the other faculty who are doing this, who are maybe not interested in doing that extra work. But the other thing is that I think there's a fundamental difference in the way that the humanities lectures put a really critical importance on the updating of the lecture and sort of the spontaneity of the material. Because if you think about it, like you could listen to somebody's lecture on Shakespeare's Hamlet from 100 years ago, and there's no sort of objective God perspective that would say that one's worse than ours. But we would certainly not listen to that lecture.
No, but why couldn't you do what Mark did or Arnold did for some of that material?
I mean, what would you want to do?
Well, I mean, there's...
Because we're not going to be demonstrating some kind of principle or anything, right? What we're doing is trying to lead students to come to their own understandings of the meaning of this, and also to come to an understanding of the major current questions and issues around, a performance of Hamlet today. And that's something that what you really want is for every lecture to be new and different, right? And to be engaging with really what's current in that material.
You say the same thing about history, because on the Khan
Yes,
Academy,
of course, of course.
No, that's right, but I mean, the Khan Academy, Sal Khan presents history, and it's really interesting and exciting, I think.
I've seen some of his history stuff, right? And what he does is basically takes sort of the curriculum of high school history and just, presents it in a sort of more, he's got an engaging manner with that, right? But what we're doing, we're not just going to be taking a sort of set curriculum. So he's got a sort of standard high school curriculum of history. So I watched his stuff on the French Revolution, right? Which you could certainly do that, right? But that's not what we teach in the humanities on the college level, right? You talk about the French Revolution, you're not going to just talk about, oh, well, a set of facts of what's going on. You're going to be talking a different sets of interpretations of what's at stake in looking back at the French Revolution. And that's really going to be presenting a set of different arguments that are going to be really in the sort of conflict with each other. And that's what you want to be presenting. And that's something that changes from year to year. And you want that kind of engagement from the professor in the current debates in order to get the engagement from the student. And I think what's expensive about what we do is the fact that we're going to be redoing the lectures every time. We're not going to do one set of lectures that we'll just be able to broadcast for the next 5 years. That's precisely what you don't really want in humanities. So I'm hoping it doesn't sound like I've answered your question properly.
Well, I was just saying nobody here is going to record a lecture for 5 years, I doubt. I mean,
right, so...
Every field has sort of the
well,
vitality to it that's going to have to be updated.
I can imagine that some of the basic chemistry stuff, it seems like you could use that in 5 years. I don't know.
Climate change does change a little bit more rapidly.
Right, but I mean basic chemistry.
And if you know the technology, you can change 1 minute here, 1 minute there. You can change your clips and you can update it. I really do find it disturbing that you would just take a 50-minute lecture and cut it into 15-minute parts that really didn't stand alone and didn't have a summary, didn't lead a student into it. You wouldn't do that in your lecture. You have to summarize each point as you make it. I think that's very important if you're going to, you just can't cut it into 15-minute segments. That will not be effective.
And even chemistry, we have an advantage. I will absolutely stipulate that the chemistry curriculum, general chemistry curriculum, is well established, and we do have some points that we want to get across. But nonetheless, we're going to take what we produce and continue to add to it. So there will be a richness that we add to it, especially the current events. So what you do is, as a student is learning their way through the material, when there's a current event, they'll come to the newest, most current video, and they will interact with what happened today in the newspaper each year. So you'll get yearly updates. That's what we plan to do, to bring in the latest technology. So when we talk about even climate and climate change in the atmosphere, we can bring in the latest technology and just adding an extra segment. So that's one of the reasons we went with very short segments, so we could intersperse them and interchange them and lead students to different segments.
I'm interested in these challenges that you're addressing with humanities, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying, that subjectivity is extremely integral to humanities, and spontaneity is an important part of a lecture, and the peers that are next to you are as important as the professor that's in front of you, which is different than engineering, for example. My dad's an engineer, and we used to have these arguments all through college that in engineering there's a right answer and a wrong answer, and in a humanities class it's all about who's sitting around you and the context and the discussions that are taking place. And I'm taking this all in and thinking about the performative aspect of the classroom in humanities. And I'm wondering that if something like Second Life doesn't lend itself much better to online learning for humanities, because you can have that spontaneity, you can have that moment, you can have that interaction, and you can have performance, you can have a performative element. And I did a really engaging project with the archaeology department at UC Berkeley, where we created a virtual Chatel Kuyuk, a Neolithic site in Turkey, in Second Life. And we terraformed the island so that it was actual data going into the island. And then we had we built a little museum, and we terraformed where the actual digs were. And we had a place where people could sandbox, where people could build their own ideas. And then we had in-world lectures. So we had in-world tours of the island, and we had an in-world film festival where we created films and videos to put on a big screen within the world. And then we invited people from all over the world, the real world, quote unquote, real world, to come into our virtual world. And we had people from Texas, we had people from Princeton, we had people from Germany, from Australia, from other places in California. We had people from all over the world converging in Second Life to have exactly what you're talking about, those discussions, the content, the meaning, the moment, the subjectivity, and it was really rich. The disadvantage is you have to coordinate a time. It's not the situation where you can come in and learn anytime, but the advantage is you have the geographic reach and the distance reach. And then there are elements that you could access on your own at any time. If you have those videos in world, you can click on them. If you have the archaeological artifacts in world, you can explore them on your own time. But you can have discussions in real time with people from all over the globe, and have a lot of what you're looking for.
So the comment was about using Second Life as a way of getting that real-time interaction. And it sounds fabulous. I mean, I think that's a great kind of project. But I think it reinforces, I think, the basic idea that in the humanities, the main advantage of the online tools is to overcome geographical, impediments to that kind of interaction that we're looking for.
But top-down information delivery in humanities is robbing students of the experience of the humanities, and they have to have that sort of interconnection.
Yeah, well, I partly agree with you, but I also, I guess, will go back to my defense of the lecture as really another form of interaction that I mean, we tried to combine both, lecture and that interactive discussion. And I think there's a value to the lecture, though, as well. There's a kind of, I guess it's a more passive kind of participation, but it's still a participation, and it's really, I think it can be just as engaging in a different way. Yeah. So, but thank you very much. I think the Second Life idea is fabulous. Yeah.
We have time for a couple more questions. Right here.
My name is Victoria Weston. I'm from UCLA, and I teach a course called Introduction to Art, Science, and Technology. And my students come from both art and science, and I feel like what I'm listening to is a demonstration of 1950s C.P. Snow division of humanities and the arts, which is ridiculous in 2011. And our students don't think that way. Our students are way ahead of this whole conversation. So this is where we're going to be all day. I really feel like we're going in the wrong direction. Just a comment.
The comment was that that our students may be thinking way ahead of where we are, what we're talking about today.
Not maybe. So
they are thinking way ahead of what we're talking about today.
think it's about listening to the students. They should be here part of this conversation and using social networks and, you know, not dividing humanities and sciences. It's ridiculous, you know, in this time, in this age, when it's such an urgent time. We're like in a fiscal disaster, environmental disaster. We need to get our students to work together from the arts and sciences. It's urgent. So to talk about how humanities is as opposed to how sciences is and the different methods, there's no one method. Anything goes. Whatever is necessary goes. So it's just a matter of figuring out how do we do this efficiently and how do we spend today efficiently to figure out what's available, how do we do it with the least amount of money and as fast as possible. That's why I'm here.
And so the comment is
it's
to...
going to be like a theoretical discussion about humanities and all of this that 1959 was talked about. I'm not interested. It just seems a waste of time.
So for our online audience, the comment is about how do we understand more what students need today and how do we engage that discussion to get there. Yeah.
Can I
Thank you.
say something to that? Just, I appreciate the comment, and I think, but I think what I'm figuring out is that really the different types of material need different methods in order to in order to transmit them. And so, you know, I think whatever people are developing, they're suited to their fields. And I don't know if it necessarily divides up into humanities and sciences. It's really different types of material that we're all developing tools to communicate. Yeah.
And in,
so
in the case of our program, it's a little different. We keep talking, whichever example we're using, we keep talking about the different lectures. We'll lecture about climate change or a lecture about Goethe or whatever, but it's also a writing course, and in particularly, there are right and wrong ways to do writing, and there are right and wrong ways to do writing instruction. Those are another thing that we have to find a way to build into a sort of online translation, how you have a discussion around that, not just about what's the most exotic or interesting or cutting-edge way to deliver lecture contents and how long should it be and how much kinds of graphics it should have and those sorts of things. So the particular challenge we have as well is how do you deal with writing instruction? And particularly in our program, they're not just writing about Shakespeare and Goethe, they're writing about Heisenberg and Galileo and a wide range of other texts. So our instructors are tasked with trying to teach interdisciplinarily in conjunction with these lectures. So it's not just that these are lectures and we figure out what's the best way to package these and organize them and would set the calendar for them and what to put alongside of them. It's for this kind of program, it's much more than that. It's about how do you teach students to not just work through different modules and lectures, but how do you get them to write and think about literature, art, philosophy, and et cetera. So that's also another thing that we're trying to work through.
Sound petty, but bear with me. One of the difficulties, I think, of creating video for online content is that it will quickly go out of style. No matter how handsome and everybody looks, your hairstyles will look silly in a video. No matter how good of a lecture I hear on whatever subject, if the guy's got sideburns and 80s big hair and big wide-collared orange shirt, I can't appreciate the lecture. And so, you know, putting a lot of money So the challenge that I think we have is how do we produce these things very efficiently, effectively, so that we can change them quickly and constantly update them. And so, Arnold, I'd kind of like to hear from you. What's the chances that you can get those 60 hours down to 1 hour?
I misspoke. It was 60 hours for the 15-minute segment. So it is, and that, a lot of that was a learning curve. And so my budget was zero. I set it up in my garage with a camera. I raced the hockey games on the memory chip and put me on instead, and then said, well, what can I do with this? So it doesn't take full production staff and video, though that does help. The nice thing about the new programs that are available, they are more user-friendly. You can work in small clips. You can replace a clip with something else as it goes timely. So I can replace my head with my current hairstyle with a hairstyle that might be acceptable if I have hair in 5 years. And so I think it is modular, and that's where I agree that having small modular units does allow you the flexibility to change as times change. To give an example of how dynamic, I had on my final exam this winter quarter a question about nuclear power, and the answer was that there hadn't been a nuclear disaster in 28 years. The day before my exam, that answer was no longer correct. And so you do have to change with the times, and it is easier to do.
So we are at the end, and I know you've been raising your hand for a while, so, okay, we're at, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd like to ask pretty much all of you, or whoever wants to take it up, on how we would want to manage student discussion. I teach ethics, and so that would be something that's important. I want to throw out like 3 different kinds of student discussion out at you. So one of them would be, let's say if you're teaching global warming, you would want to give, for example, a student who's a global warming denialist or very skeptical, some kind of possibility to engage you and possibly even have an audience of students listening in on that, okay? Which would be sort of like Socratic dialogue maybe. Then the other thing is that not everything that students say or produce is good. In fact, much of it is like complete garbage. So, for example, I've had a lot of students develop presentations for in class, and I can tell you that, let's say if someone presents for 20 minutes in class, it costs me about 10 hours to prepare that student group to present in class. If I just let them sort of present sort of what they think is a good presentation, it would be like just completely awful. So there's sort of an issue of like, do you want to just let students sort of go on and on and on and say completely horrible and awful things? By the way, I don't mean awful in terms of political bias or something. I mean awful just qualitatively, in terms of the quality. Okay. And then the third thing I want to throw out there is I had a TA maybe 2 or 3 years ago who wanted to do online office hours and then sort of post it all online and so on and so forth. And I got this huge number of student complaints because let's say he had a total of maybe 4 hours worth of office hours, and so they felt that they had to sort of wade through, you know, like all this stuff that was online, and it would have been much better if someone had just sort of posted a sort of 1-page summary of what they were expected to do, as opposed to them having to read through all sorts of questions and the TA's answers and this and that and so on. And so I wonder if some of you might pick up on one of those 3 issues.
So the question is about engaging students in discussion and how to deal with the different quality that they have and to manage your time and their time as well, roughly? We are going to have a panel on student engagement and student interaction, so we'll get into that more. Does anybody want to address how you would do that online?
So we are using the same, and I think tired techniques that you're talking about now, and that is we do have online chat and online discussion, and then we post transcripts and students view them. And I do agree that that's probably not the most effective way to do that. I think one of the things that I found in developing my course is that we're just still technology limited. Although things are brilliantly and moving quickly, the things that you actually can do commercially, that is, I have to deliver this class now to 70 students and they're paying for it, so it has to be ready to go and it has to be professional. Those things were limited, and we are still limited to the kind of things that you're talking about. So we're hoping that the common learning system that's being developed and is going out and getting the latest and greatest and bringing those to us will hopefully do that. And there are several examples, and Dan has 2 or 3 that work brilliantly to bring students together and have them discuss and be peer mentors and take out some of the 20 hours of work that you have to do to get things together, so that by the time it gets to your desk, it's been reviewed by several students, and they're very critical of each other, and things converge to quality with peer review before it gets to this instructor. But I don't think those things are ready for prime time for delivery, and certainly in my course, simply because there's not a tool that I can go out and grab and then incorporate into Angel, the system that I have to use, and monitor it and make sure it works. So I think a lot of those things we're waiting for the common learning system to grow, bring in the tools that we can use to do that.
So I would just say that, in developing the online discussion sections that we're doing, we're really just limiting it to the same kind of limitations we have in the live discussion sections. We're going to, maximum section size will probably be, 20, 22. And we're going to work with maybe, I haven't decided on software yet, but we'll want to have separate video feeds for every single student to really have the same kind of monitoring of what's going on and the same participation level as in a live discussion. Otherwise, I don't think it would really make sense for us at all.
Okay, so we are going to have another panel on fostering student interaction this afternoon, and hopefully we'll come back to some of those questions. And thank you.
Thank you. So just real quickly, couple things. One of them, first, thank you very much to the panelists. That was really very good and great discussion. I just wanted to pick up on the point that was made earlier. I mean, I was actually a graduate student in Oxford when C.P. Snow was having a revival. He was just dead in 1980, and the consequence was there was the well, sort of, the Festschrift kind of phenomenon took over, and and this was an interesting kind of phenomenon. And I think inevitably throughout the next couple of years, as we're all joined to the hip, there's going to be a constant discussion about what's appropriate for my discipline. I don't think we can avoid that, but I don't want to believe that that's what we're hearing here. I think what we're hearing here is there's a number of problems that we have to solve. Nobody really knows how to solve them. We all have these interesting ways, and the hope was by exchanging this kind of information, having some demonstration, some sort of a problem-focused orientation. This is what I need to achieve in this course. This is how I'm going about it, getting some feedback from the audience. It begins that process of trading ideas amongst each other. So I think that's what we're trying to achieve, and what we will be trying to achieve across obviously the next couple of days, but also over the course of the next couple of years. One theme that comes out, I mean, I've been tracking, and I'm sure you have as well, this notion of video production and how to drive the costs down to get up to the efficiency point and to get to some of the learning curve issues that we heard about. And I don't know whether there's an answer to this question, but it might be interesting if there is some. I'm guessing there's probably some collective interest in video production, whether in short snippets or long snippets. And my guess is that our capacity across the system is, like everything else, reasonably fragmented and somewhat varied. And I'm wondering whether it is a topic that we need to explore as a collective. If there is some general interest, how to provide the, how to not steepen, what's the word, flatten the learning curve and drive the cost down and then make the capacity available across the group. I mean, I think that's one set of issues. And then I think there's another set of issues about how to use video effectively, how to exchange and learn collectively with each other.
And I just wanted to say I think that's absolutely right, and I would encourage the people that have those interests to get together with this really strong media team that we have here, especially later this afternoon when we have the sort of open time. And right before that, we should have them wave their hands and remind everybody what they look like so that you can go, and then they can bring back to us some ideas about how we might have future presentations on techniques and software and all the pieces that could go into that, because we're very interested in tracking that.
So Kirk is saying that there's a video production folks expertise that was just, so there we go. There is funnily enough, a sign-up sheet for a breakout session has appeared with that sort of heading out in the hallway, so for those of you who want it. In the meantime, lunch will be served